So I want to thank everyone for coming today, and thank Elon for opening us up this morning. A lot of good information about ASP.NET and sort of where that team is going. And this morning I want to talk a little bit about DNN and sort of where we're going and what's coming up this next year for DNN. So we'll talk about the future of DNN as we go through this morning. I did want to say a couple of things. Bonjour. The extent of my French, so I won't get you anymore with that. But bienvenido a mi lado. And my Dutch is van Balachoy, I think it's but not sure what that last one means, but it's the only Dutch I know, so we'll call it good there. So anyway, but welcome everybody, and thank you to all the sponsors of the event. But let's talk a little bit about sort of where we're going as a community, as a platform, as a company, in terms of DNN. And in order to talk about the future, if I can get my machine to cooperate here, we're going to talk about history a little bit. We're going to go back a little farther than Elon did. So when I look at this picture of Stonehenge, a couple of things come to mind, right? It's like you look at it and you say, wow, this thing's incredibly old. It's been around a long time. But you also see a sense of stability, a sense of strength, a sense of something that has withstood a long period of time and is still around, right? And when I think about DNN, I think about that same thing. Depending on your perception and your viewpoint of DNN and our history, right? We have this very stable, very rich, very mature platform that has stood us well over the last decade, almost decade and a half now. So over the last couple of years, what we've been trying to do is build on our previous successes, even over the past decade, right? It's go from one strength to one strength, building from one release to another, and continuing to improve on this journey every step of the way, to take what we had that was working and to continue to execute on that with each new release. With 7.4, we had a lot of great new functionality in terms of the developer side of the story, about things that we're tightening up in the framework and the direction we want to go there. We'll talk a little bit later this morning about what we're doing in 8.0 and some of the changes that are coming up in the next major release that we're currently working on. The other side of that success, and the one thing that I really want to stress, because I think it's important to the people in this room, I think it's important to the health of the platform, and that's really just how engaged the community has become, but also how much more engaged we still need to get to, right? In terms of people who are contributing and working on the platform. This is well beyond now just DNN Corp building DNN. This is DNN community building DNN. And the key as we move forward, and we'll talk about this a little bit later, is how do we strengthen that? How do we take that to the next level? How do we get more people involved and continue to build on the successes that we've had to date? Because I think ultimately, as an open source project, whether it's open source at Microsoft, whether it's open source DNN, or any other open source, the true strength of the project is not in the lines of source code, or it's not in a feature that's delivered in the package. It's in the community and the people that are behind those lines of code, people that are behind the individual features, right? Because if we build a feature and nobody uses it, or we write a bunch of code and nobody tests it, or nobody tries it out, you know, what good was that effort, right? So let's talk a little bit about DNN 8, sort of where we're going and what's in there. And I'm going to spend quite a bit of time talking about DNN 8 this morning because I think it's important for our community. One of the things that, as we get into this, that I want to talk more about is the idea that Peter had earlier, and what Peter talked about in the opening remarks earlier, in that we are at a fork in the road. There is two sides to the community, and both sides of the community have valid arguments, have valid requirements. They're both equally important to the strength and the health of the community, and it's important that we know where we're going with the current platform, even as we talk about where we're going with DNN next, right? Neither one, it's not an either or, it's both, right? So think about it in terms of and, not or. So again, coming back to the Stonehenge, or in this case, a large oak tree out in the middle of a meadow. The thing that you think about when you see this picture is the strength and vitality of that tree. This oak tree didn't just get there overnight, right? This is something that built up over a period of many, many years. And the strength and vitality that we have in DNN today is not the result of 7.4.0 release or the 7.4.1 release that we had this last week, right? This is something that took us many years to get to this point. And it's not something that we would just go and chop down and get rid of tomorrow. And it's not something that anyone should advocate that we get rid of tomorrow, right? There is a lot of strength and life left in the platform and in what we're doing today. And that's sort of one of the things as we talk about DNN-8 and what we're doing in DNN-8 that we have to keep in mind. It's like, how do I keep growing and nurturing and watering the tree that is DNN as it exists today, even as we talk about planting a new tree for tomorrow. So as we talk about DNN in terms of where it's at, in terms of where it's going, one of the things that you'll often hear in technology is this idea of crossing the chasm. Like, how is technology adopted by people in the broader market, right? And so typically you'll see a curve and it looks something like this, right? And you've got people at the front end, innovators, who will come and they'll adopt technology almost immediately as soon as it's released, right? There are many people in this room who fall into that category. That we were the guys who were out there downloading DNN the first month, the first days that it was out, available on the internet. iBuySpy, right? We all were there when it was still iBuySpy and iBuySpy Workshop. And then there are going to be those people who came a little bit later when DNN was getting established, when we had some of our early releases, the 1.0 release, the 2.0 release. They're the guys who are out saying, it's great, I can see sort of where this is going, but I want to get involved, I want to start using this and be a part of that growth, right, as we start taking off. You have your early majority. These are the people who come in after things are sort of stable, 3.0, 4.0, maybe even into the 5.0 range of DNN, right, our late majority. And notice now that this is the vast bulk of the users of technology, right? They exist in this middle category. These are not the guys who are out there on the bleeding edge. These are not the guys who are loading the ASP.NET 5 betas, right? These are not beta testers. These are not that group. This is the guys who are running ASP.NET 3.5, maybe 4.5.1 in their environments, right? And they're very happy in this area. Then you have this other group. They're called laggards, and they break down into various segments in there, but these are the very latecomers to technology. These are the guys who are very happy today with web forms. These are the guys who are very happy today running ASP.NET 3.5, even as other people are talking about ASP.NET 5, right? And there are various flavors of these. There are various people who may fall into different categories depending on which piece of technology you're talking about. So it's not like a broad sweeping statement that everyone running 3.5 is a laggard. But right, it's about how quickly you're willing to adopt new technology and how it serves your needs. The other thing that is often missed when people talk about the technology curve is that by the time you are attracting those laggards to your platform, because you're stable, because you're this large oak tree out in the middle of the forest, right? By the time you attract those laggards, you actually start losing those early adopters. You start losing all of those people who came on early because they were excited because you were the new leading edge, bleeding edge piece of technology, right? They're already on looking for that next generation of leading edge technology, right? The line in yellow that you see there is really sort of the curve. It's called the S curve. And it's the adoption curve or the market penetration curve that you actually have for technology. So as you attract those early adopters and get into the majorities and then into the laggards, right? Ultimately, you're going to peak out at some point along that curve about how much you can grow with that technology in that market space, and sort of ultimately what you want to do is be able to get the entire market. But the reality is you'll never get the entire market because, as I mentioned, by the time you start getting some of the later portion of the market, you're already starting to lose some of the original people who adopted your technology. And we're seeing that today in the DNN community. We are seeing people in the DNN community who say, you don't have MVC, I've got to look elsewhere. You guys aren't really doing SPA development the way we want to do SPA development. I'm looking elsewhere. You guys really aren't doing modern development technology. We might look elsewhere, right? So we hear all of those things from the market, and it's not the people in this room. The people in this room are quite happy with DNN, right? That's why we're here. If we weren't, we probably wouldn't have come to the conference. But everyone's got a valid viewpoint in terms of what works for them. And so one of the things that we have to look at as we look at where we're going and sort of who we're addressing as we're talking about DNN-8 and DNN-Next, and we talk about this fork in the road, is we have to have a plan for what we're doing for our existing technology, knowing that there is a natural ebb and flow and a natural life cycle and a natural lifespan to all technology. And we have to start planning for what's that new technology that we're going to have. And how do we overlay the two? How do we plan for that follow-on technology so that even as our current technology is starting to wane, that we have new technology in place that will pick up, and by the time we end of life the existing technology, the new technology is mature enough that we capture those early and late majority groups again, and that the new technology is mature enough at that point for them to make the transition, right? If you look at these graphs and the way they overlap, right, you want to be developing your new technology even as your old technology is in the middle of its largest growth phase, right? So that by the time the older technology is end of life, that the new technology has matured enough that people can make that transition. And the key here is different people are going to make the transition at different times, right? Early adopters are going to jump on very quickly. Late adopters, majorities, laggards, are going to come in much later in the new technology cycle. And again, there's some future technology that you have to look at as well. So even as we're looking at the new technology now, we're looking at ASP.NET 5 and sort of where they're going. We have to start thinking today about what is beyond ASP.NET 5. How do we ensure that 5 years from now, when we have the same conversation, that we're able to see sort of where the market is going. And from a technologist perspective, this is a constant ebb and flow of these generations of technologies that we have to evaluate. So back to what we want to talk about, which is DNN-8 for a minute. So the thing that I want to stress more than anything else in this segment as we talk about DNN-8 is that there is a strong commitment from DNN Corp. There's a strong commitment from Peter and the other leaders in the community, myself, and others, around ensuring that if you're running DNN today, on web forms today, that you have customers today, that you are going to have DNN for many years to come in a flavor that suits you, right? We're not telling you you have to get rid of web forms. We're not telling you that you have to get rid of DNN-7 or DNN-8. Those are still great platforms for you to continue to build on and to continue to grow with, and we're going to continue to support them for many years to come. But the flip side of that coin is it's not just about DNN Corp and what we're willing to support, right? Because we have customers on DNN-7 today. Those customers expect support for many years to come yet on the stuff that they're running. But it's also about the community and what the community is willing to support and the commitment that the community is willing to make to the existing platform. Because I can tell you right now that if the community decides tomorrow that they don't want to do any more code changes or code check-ins for DNN-8 or DNN-7 or any of those, and all of the community decides that they're going to move their customers off of that existing platform onto DNN Next, that DNN-8 will be done. And it won't matter what I want or anyone else wants. It will ultimately come down to what the community wants, right? And what the community is willing to support. So as much as I would like to say DNN Corp is going to support this for the next 5 years, ultimately what matters is what is the community going to support? What does the community want to do? And where is the community willing to make investments of their time, energy, and resources in terms of making DNN-8 and 8.1 and 8.5 and 9.0, and to make all of those continue to have life even beyond where we're at today. So with that, let's talk a little bit about specifics about what we're doing for DNN-8, and we'll talk about timeframes and things like that. So DNN-8, what we're laying out is sort of a reimagining or a re-architecting, if you will, in some cases, and doing some refactoring of the architecture to try to create something that's a little more layered and a little more clearly delineated in which parts of the architecture are intended for which group of stakeholders. DNN has long called ourselves both a web application framework and a CMS, and that's great, and we do serve both of those markets. What's not clear, though, is what does it mean to be a web application framework, which is clearly targeting IT and developers and people who just need the basic foundation and are going to build on top of that. And what we're working towards in DNN-8, and we will get the basics of this in place in DNN-8, and it may take us 8.1, 8.2, 8.3 until we get all of the pieces finally in place, but we've started some of that already. And this is really about creating that pure web application framework, right? About having a very solid IT focus, having a secure REST API for the core framework, meaning that you should be able to call a REST API and say, create a new user. You should be able to call a REST API and say, create a new site. You should be able to call a REST API and say, delete that user or delete all the unauthorized users, right? You shouldn't have to go to a UI to do everything that you want to do in DNN. But the key part of that REST API, like we could build a REST API today in DNN, but the secure part is the part that we have been lacking for a while in terms of building out those REST APIs, right? We have security as long as it's a module calling its own API, and we can do that today in DNN-7, and all the way back, I think DNN-5X or 6, one of the 6s, we released that. And so what we're adding in DNN-8 and what we have in the CTP1 is adding some additional security pieces that allow you to create REST APIs using HMAC authentication, which is great for delivering a REST API security in a non-HTTPS environment. So let me repeat that. If you do not have SSL, you should still be able to build secure REST APIs. And the HMAC attributes and the HMAC capabilities that we're building and delivered actually in the CTP2 2 weeks ago. So sidebar, how many people have downloaded and looked at CTP2 already? A couple of people. So if you haven't, I would urge you, please go take a look at it, see what's in there. I'm going to show you quite a bit of that today. Please go take a look at it. Give us your feedback. Tell us what you like. Tell us what you don't like. If you see something you don't like, go look at the code, submit a patch. We're always looking for people who want to help, whatever way makes sense for you. So anyway, back to, so HMAC is in there today, and you can test it out. We've still got some UI tweaks we need to do. We know the UI is still got some changes we need to do. The next piece we're going to work on is OAuth support, and specifically OAuth 2 support in that REST API. And the key part there is that OAuth 2, the specification by itself, very clearly says this specification, this protocol, is only intended for use over SSL. It is not a secure protocol for using in an unsecure web environment. So, and that's why we have both of these available, because some people just are not going to run SSL, but they still may want a REST API for their apps and for the core. And for those other people who are willing to run SSL, then we'll give you the OAuth support. Ultimately, I think what the final way this is going to shake out is that the OAuth 2, we will just automatically disable it if we're not running in an SSL environment. We're not going to support OAuth 2 over an unsecure line, knowing the security implications of doing that. So we will have some things in the core to look to see if SSL is available, and if it is, we'll enable OAuth, and if it's not, we'll turn OAuth off so you don't have to worry from a security perspective. The other bigger changes, I think, the ones that are much more impactful, is that we've got some new development capability in terms of new frameworks that we're going to support in DNN-8. And the two that we're going to talk about today, and I'm actually going to demo a little bit, is the MVC module types. So we're going to leverage the full ASP.NET MVC stack and allow you to develop extensions and modules using that stack. And also single page application or SPA module types using plain HTML, JavaScript, CSS with a web API backend, which I think is really where more of the internet is going today. But the key here to this base DNN platform is that it will be a minimal UI. In other words, most of the administrative functionality will be completely stripped out in terms of management UIs, and we will focus on just that pure core developer experience for the platform. But there's another piece to this as well, and that's really about the solution as it exists today, the package as it exists today, which is the CMS solution, right? Which is DNN as we all know it, right? Which is to take all of those management UI pieces that we took out of the platform and rebundle them back in. And what this really looks like ultimately, and we're still working on getting the final layers in place or packaging in place, and this is still to come this summer, is about having a set of packages that we define as the core, and we'll deliver a zip and say if all you need is the lightweight core application, think of this as if you will, that core min-win experience. And if you need the more richer, full, complete CMS, you'll download the DNN CMS distribution, and I use that word very specifically because there may be a DNN-Connect distribution which packages different modules with DNN, which may have some different administrative pieces than we deliver with the official DNN core CMS, right? So as we move forward in this new world, we will have distributions from many different groups, many different individuals who say, this is how I see the pieces that we need for DNN, and this is our flavor of distribution. We'll still deliver them through the existing channels. You'll still be able to come to DNNsoftware.com and download the DNN-Connect distribution. And you'll be able to come to DNN.com or DNNsoftware.com and you'll be able to download the Too Sexy Content CMS distribution. And you'll be able to come to DNNsoftware.com and you'll be able to say, I just want the core platform so I can do development because all I'm using is a framework. I was at a customer site not long ago, and it's a fairly well-known organization. They do a lot of news, and they work with news feeds and do a lot of news editing. And they've built out a content system on top of DNN, and they're using our Evoke platform for doing this. But the thing that was interesting as I was at this customer site is they use almost no DNN administrative UI at all, right? They have a couple of pages set up. Every page that they use, every page that their editors use and everyone else in the organization uses is all their own modules that they've written that are specific to editing news for their organization and publishing that news into an external repository. They don't even publish the content into DNN proper in our database. They publish it out through a enterprise service bus into an external system, and then some other system actually pulls that data and presents it on the web. So when you see it on the web, you're not seeing the DNN piece, you're seeing the output of a DNN app. But the interesting thing to note is in that whole process, none of their users ever come into contact with any of the administrative functionality really of DNN. There's a couple of pieces they use, but they use Active Directory for managing users, and they use all this other stuff, and they really just use DNN as a shell for writing their applications. And that's sort of part of why this, I think, approach makes more sense for DNN, because if you need a web application framework, that's really what you want. And if you want DNN as a CMS, that's really what you want. And you can have a DNN-Connect CMS and a Too Sexy Content CMS, right? Whatever the distribution is that serves your needs, we should be able to support that within DNN. So with that, let's go ahead and take a look at DNN 8. I'm going to be showing you CTP code and showing you a lot of different pieces of what's in there today, and talk about sort of where we're going with some of those pieces. I'm going to go ahead and sit so I can go into code a little bit better here, but let's go ahead and open up, we'll go ahead and open up Visual Studio. Yes?
You do better switching to the white background business, and because of the
yes.
because of the lighting.
There we go. Everyone's like, great, I can see. I can see, yes. And we'll zoom in a little bit here. Okay, so and some of this we'll zoom in as we go through. So nothing special, nothing magical, right? This is the DNN that we've all known and loved. If you go into the solution, everything is going to look the same way as it does today. You are going to start to see some more modules as we break them out. So things like newsletters, recycle bin have already been broken out. You're going to see over the next couple of months this area grow even more as we start moving items out of desktop modules, out of this admin area. They'll start showing up as proper projects underneath. today in the CTP. You can see we've got newsletters and recycle bin. Once we break all of these modules out, you can expect that not all of them may get distributed with the new CMS platform, core CMS platform. We may make the decision, and there are a few modules like newsletters which ultimately are going to go out and live in the Forge. They probably won't get bundled with the core CMS, right? We have a lot of features and functionality in DNN today that's just delivered for maybe 2% or 5% of our user base, and it doesn't make sense that everyone should pay a price for having those in their CMS when they're not needed. So that's one of the changes that's coming. So the other big thing, and the thing that I want to focus on here for a minute, is that we've got this new folder here, if I can find it, MVC modules. So MVC modules. So today we've got a sample in there for the HTML module. Our original plan was to rewrite the HTML module in MVC, and we're probably not going to finish this piece of work. We've got some other modules we're going to redo in MVC. We'll talk about more in a minute. But the HTML module is a great example that works today. It's in the CTP2 that you can go and take a look at. And the thing to note as you go through this is if we go and look at the views that exist in that module, you don't see any ASCX files. And you won't see any ASCX files. We don't need an ASCX file. We don't need web forms in order to build a module anymore. We can build in CTP 1 and 2 for DNN-8. We can build using all the patterns that an MVC developer is used to. So we can have controllers and models and views, and we can use Razor script just like we would if we were building an MVC application from scratch, right? So we can have we'll inherit from a special page, and Charles will be going more into detail in some of this in his discussions later, but all of the same things that you would see in a standard MVC application, you'll see here in your code, right? And I'll let Charles go into all the gory details of that a little bit later. But this is, I think, a big step forward for the community and for DNN, because now it gives our developers some choice. And one of the things that I've always liked about DNN is that we've always put the choice out there for our developers and our users to say, if you want to use X, you can do that, right? We're an enabling technology. If you want to do Y, you can do that, and we'll enable those scenarios. And with the MVC module, we now have another set of scenarios that we can support in the core platform in terms of how you do development. So MVC is interesting. The other one that we wanted to support, and I did this talk, or did part of this talk at a user group can we not play with the, yeah. So if we, so when I was doing this talk earlier with another user group, you know, as I was talking about MVC and sort of where we were going with MVC, they said, well, but we're doing SPA development now. We don't do MVC development anymore, we do SPA. And it's like, I understand. Some people really like MVC, and that's sort of where they're at mentally. But for those people who want to do SPA and SPA development, we actually have in DNN-8 today and in the CTP today, you can go and you can write some HTML and CSS and JavaScript and package that up as a module. And if you look through this module, you'll see again that there is that there's no ASCXs here anywhere, that this is just HTML And if we go into the folders here, you'll see a little bit of JavaScript, but there's no user controls of any sort there, right? And that's really the experience we want. If you're doing SPA development, you should get a SPA development experience. If you're doing MVC development, you should get an MVC development experience. And if you're doing web forms and that's the experience you want, that's the experience you should get. And it should feel native and natural no matter which type of development you're trying to do. And again, Charles has another session where he's going to be going in deeper into SPA. So if you're interested in that, check out Charles's session. A couple of things I will point out because I think they're important for the CTP is that as we were doing this, as we were developing the MVC approach, and as we were developing the SPA module approach, one of the things that we realized is it's not just about writing a SPA module, because I could write JavaScript and HTML today and pump them out and get an experience today. I could do MVC-ish a little bit today. But what we want is for those developers who are using those frameworks to also get more of an integrated experience with the core DNN APIs and the core DNN platform, and to expose DNN capability. Even as you're developing a SPA module, you should still be able to leverage the underlying framework to help you, right? So if we're in SPA, if we're in that HTML world, we have some new tokens that we're going to support, and they're in the CTP2. So here's one for JavaScript. We're using just JSON for our property types. So this is a new capability that we added to the token replacement engine in DNN-8. So here I can say I want the knockout library, right? So in DNN-7, we added the ability to 7.2, I think. We added the ability to have JavaScript libraries defined. And you could have a JavaScript library with a name, and then we know how to load the JavaScript for that thing. You don't have to know about where the CDN is or where the file is or whether it's minified or not. We'll take care of all of that for you. So just like Elon showed earlier with the CDN and the fallbacks and all of that's built into the JavaScript libraries. You can drop this one token in your HTML and it will figure out how to do that injection for you, right? So we're going to leverage the DNN API and the DNN libraries in your HTML, and we're going to do that with something that we natively support today, which is token replace. So as this HTML is being processed and injected into the page, we'll figure out that there are tokens there, and we'll do the appropriate replacements in that even as we inject the HTML for you. So there are a couple of these, and Charles will talk more about all of the specific ones that we've done, ResX and CSS and the rest. But I think those are a great example of how we want to integrate and expose the DNN platform through these different development types. So then the other interesting thing to note, and this is something I started playing around with. I didn't have time to fully flesh out a demo for here, but we can talk about it a little bit. And that is, what does it really mean? How does this change how I define modules? And the reality is, as Charles worked through this and as we talk back and forth about what this looks like, is that you don't really change at all how you develop and package modules from a DNN perspective, right? So we've always had within a module this concept of a module control, right? Historically, that module control has been an ASCX file that lived somewhere on disk, and we would pull that ASCX file and inject it into your page. And now when we talk about SPA modules, we'll just inject an HTML file instead of an ASCX file. We'll do a little bit of processing on that for some token replace, but everything else in terms of the manifest looks exactly the same. And in fact, DNN doesn't really care, other than this .html, DNN doesn't really care what this thing is here. It knows, oh, it's an HTML file. This is how I inject HTML files. For the MVC side, we actually have a different naming convention, and this is one area where we differ from the ASP.NET framework a little bit, in that we have a .mvc extension here, and that tells DNN, hey, this is a MVC controller and view that I need to inject. And in fact, this is the controller, and that's the actual action on that controller that we're going to inject. So this tells DNN what that entry point is for this particular module control. Now I know, hey, all I got to do is call the HTML text controller and call the index action. The index action knows how to wire up its own views, right? That's standard part of MVC, and all of that gets injected. So this is truly, from a module packaging perspective and a module framework perspective, the only difference between web forms, MVC, and SPA module development. Everything else to a DNN developer should feel natural, to an MVC developer should feel natural, to a SPA client-side developer should feel natural, right? And that's really the direction that we're going in terms of developing this out. The MVC code that's there today, the MVC framework pits, are fully functional. Everything we think that we need for MVC is supported. The SPA module bits, we have everything working for the standard views for SPA. We're still working through some scenarios around how do you integrate with the settings page. So we're still working through a couple scenarios there, and we expect by the next CTP, or possibly by the beta that'll be coming up this summer, that we'll have all of those pieces in place. But there's enough there today. Go download the CDP and play around with the MVC modules types, play around with the SPA module types, because those are sort of where we're going with the platform. Those are, of all the pieces I look at from a developer's perspective in DNN 8, those are the two that are probably going to have the most impact on you and how you develop for DNN. And so I know Daniel's got a flavor of SPA that he likes and that his team uses, and other people, likewise Bruce Chapman on our team has done some development and publishing lately on the way he does SPA. I would love to get your feedback on how this feels from a developer perspective in SPA development. So please take a look at the code bits. There are a couple other pieces. You'll notice here I'm playing with a module called the Dynamic Content Manager. So one of the things that we wanted as we were developing DNN 8, and we sat down and thought about, and looked at many of the other CMS platforms that are out there today. And the one thing that historically has been missing in the core CMS platform is the actual content management piece, if you will, right? We have content, we have lots of modules that all manage their own little bit of content, but we don't have what most other CMSs consider content management, right? We don't have a central content store where different people are editing different bits of content in that store, in a single store, single location, and then exposing that in different ways with different templates and things. And so I also noticed that there were a number of different developers in the community who were developing different different CMS capabilities, whether it's too sexy content, or whether it's open content, or whether it's form and list, or there are a number of different ones that are developed in the community. And it's like, you know, one of the things that I know is that helps people is when they sort of have a standard that they can go back to, right, and build on top of. It's like, why does everyone have to build their own set of APIs, their own way of storing content? Because the minute they do that, it's like we fragment the community in terms of all speaking one language, in terms of what does it look like to store content, how can we leverage that and expose that in new and interesting ways. So one of the things we're doing, one of the features of DNN-8 is a new dynamic content system. Dynamic Content Creator is the overall feature. So we have already in the CTP, we have a dynamic content API that's part of the core platform. And that API, and we built it specifically as a separate standalone API, no UI. It's about making sure that the API can do everything that a person would need to do for managing, displaying content, searching for content. And then now we are building out some of the user experiences on top of that API. But ultimately, as we went back to this idea that we have a platform and we have a CMS distribution, again, we will have a set of platform APIs for content. And as part of the distribution, we will have some management UI that goes on top of that. So in the CTP today, we have a module that we're in the middle of working on. It's not anywhere near complete. We're still going through a lot of UI changes on it. If you go into and you install the CTP today, you will not see this module installed anywhere. It is in the CTP. You'll have to go and create your own page in the admin area or wherever you want to put it. So I've created a page here. I'm just going to add the module. The module does come installed, but you've got to actually wire it up to this last piece. So there's my Dynamic Content Manager. So there are really two pieces to the UI experience, and right now we're working on the management side of that. There is the Dynamic Content Manager. This UI is going to change. I already know some changes that we're gonna redo this a little bit, but the experience that I want to get across is that this is built using the SPA module. So the SPA module example I was talking about earlier is for this specific module. So if you look at the code base, as we develop this module out, it will be developed completely using the SPA framework. So the idea is you'll have content types. Think of content types as basically virtual tables within your system. So you can define as many or as few columns as you need in your table for storing the type of content that you want to edit and use and display on your site. So think of today, we have an HTML module, right? And an HTML module is literally that. It's one piece of content. It's a single column table that says, here's my HTML text, spit it out there. But you'll be able to come in and say, you know what, I want to have HTML, but I also want to have a title because I want people to be able to edit a title independent of the text they're going to display. Maybe I've got an image that I want to, a hero image that I want to go with that. You'll be able to define that and display that. Today, in this example, the only thing we have working and wired up completely is the data types. If you get one of the nightly builds from DNN-8, we've already started working on the content types, so those will be coming next. But the other thing to notice is as I go through this, I'm not doing postbacks. There's no postbacks anywhere in here. This is all calling a web service backend, and this is just standard JavaScript and CSS and wiring it up to the framework. So I can come in, I can define a new type, and my type might be a URL. I can save that. I can make this a system type, meaning it's available across all portals, and we can save that. And then we can start building up our own type system, our own data types. On top of those data types, then we'll build content types. So data types define what a field is or what a column is in your virtual table, and then you can build out your virtual table. So watch this to change a lot as we go beyond CTP2. The basics are there in CTP2, so you can start to look at where we're going, but look at the nightly builds if you want to see more of this as it starts coming together over the next month or two. Okay. The other part of this, so this is all management experience. There will be another part that's coming in the betas, which will be about the presentation side, i.e. what do content editors see? What does my end user on the website see when they come to the website? This is just the management or administrative experience that we're focusing on right now. Okay? So those are some of the big highlights that you're going to see in DNN-8. The other thing to note is that Oliver is currently working on helping us get all of the Telerik stuff out of our UIs and out of the core platform as a hard dependency. We will still ship and deliver Telerik as it exists today, so that if you have modules that depend on Telerik, they'll continue to work. But in terms of the core administrative experience and the core requirements of the DNN platform, we're no longer going to have a hard dependency on Telerik. And you may be wondering, okay, well, if we don't have Telerik, what am I going to use for editing of HTML? And so actually in 7.4.1, which we just released this week. So how many people, quick show of hands, how many people have downloaded the new 7.4.1? Okay, good. Quite a few people. We'll get you a custom download, Peter, so you don't have to. don't want you to have to wait for it. Yeah. I hear you were busy last week, so you're excused. Actually, in 7.4.1, we have the CK editor provider, and it's actually this is a fork, effectively, of Ingo Herbote's CK editor provider. Engage Software actually last fall did a whole day where they took the entire company, 20 people, I think, 19 people, and they devoted to making a bunch of changes to this, enhancements, integrating it more into the existing DNN experience, so that when you come in to DNN, we'll let that finish installing. But in 7.4.1, you can go and install this today. It's not in the 8.0 packages, so I'm showing you a 7.4.1 experience at the moment. But you'll be able to load up the CK editor. Right now, it's what we're calling beta. So in 7.4.1, it's available as an available extension. It's not pre-installed. It's there in your available extensions area. So go there, check it out. But we're considering it beta for this period. By the time we get to 8, it will be a final release of that provider. And so now if I come in and I edit the HTML here, I will go ahead and I will get my CK editor experience. So this is very different from the RAD editor that we have today. And this is one that we'll be moving forward with. Going forward, CK editor will be the native editing experience. Notice we don't have the tabs here at the bottom. That's one of the big ways you can tell. We do have the ability to come in and make customizations now to the editor. We'll get that pop-up screen. Still got a few UI areas that we need to clean up. But there's a lot of capability in terms of how much control you have over this, all the way down to the individual module level. The other big change that Engage and their guys at Engage did, is that if you come into the HTML editor manager, so once you've installed this CK editor provider, now it will integrate into the HTML editor manager. So notice I've still got my RAD editor. All of that is exactly the same as what you saw before for the RAD editor, but now we have this new CK editor experience as well. And I've got a few UI rendering issues here in 8. I'm not sure what's going on over here, but I don't see the same thing in 7.4.1, so it may be something specific to 8 that's going wrong here. But anyway, so this is the CK editor and sort of where we're going with that. So this is going to be part of 8, and you can look for that going forward.
Joe, is it installing it automatically replacing that as making it default?
Yes, it did. Yeah. And I believe that's the same experience if you do it with the other provider, with Ingo's provider as well. It does the same thing, right? But it's easy enough. The HTML editor manager will let you switch that right back, so it's not, you're not going to break anything or have an experience that's hard to go back to. So those are some of the big changes we've got coming in DNN 8. There are lots of other smaller changes that are coming, but those are some of the big ones. We do have things like a new image handler that is in DNN 8, and that'll be replacing a lot of the image handling we're doing today. That also is a community contribution as well. So lots of changes. But the other thing that's important is that we're open. If there are features that you think should be in, if there are bug fixes you think should be in, start working on them today. Submit your pull request today. And Charles and myself and Peter and Vicens and many of the other guys will help get those incorporated into the platform. If you have questions about how to do a pull request, stick around for Ernst Peter's talk right after this. He'll be going over Git and GitHub and how to do pull requests. That's an important part of the community today, and it's a part we want to keep growing today. If you have questions beyond that, we'll be around all weekend. Get with somebody. If you're interested at all in contributing to the platform, please see one of us, sit in on the session, learn how to do that. So in terms of DNN 8, when are we delivering that? When is that going to be out? So right now we're on pace to deliver a CTP or a beta or an RC basically about once every month. Right now we actually skipped the month of April. So from here forward, you should see a drop in June. You should see a drop in July and August. And we are planning to actually ship DNN 8 and deliver that for September. So everyone should be coming back from vacation, which I understand vacations start next week, all the way through. And by the time you get back from your vacation in September, then DNN 8 will be there ready for you. So that's DNN 8. So now let's talk a little bit, very briefly, about DNN Next and sort of where we're going with that. I'm not going to go into a lot of details here, and we'll talk about why. One of the things before we go into that, one of the things I want to make sure that everyone takes away from this today is that I want you to make the choice that's appropriate for you and your organization as to which path you go down, right? Do you want to stay with DNN 8 and the current web forms based development branch, or do you want to jump over? Are you one of those innovators? Are you one of those early adopters that is going to jump over to DNN Next? And even if you are on DNN 8 today, that doesn't mean you have to stay there. The intent is for there to be a path for you to go from DNN 8X, whatever it is, to DNN Next when that makes sense for you and your organization. and we'll develop the tooling to help you do that. It is not going to be an upgrade. It is not going to be, I just run the normal DNN upgrade experience and I go from DNN 8 to DNN Next, right? We're talking about two very, very different technology bases, and because of that, there will be some work to go from one to the other, but we do fully intend that it will be possible to migrate, and migrate being the key word, not upgrade, right? So one of the commitments that we have as we talk about DNN Next and as we get into this development cycle, and I heard this talk from someone else who was working on some upgrading their platform to DNN-Connect or to ASP.NET 5, is that the concepts and the things that you know about what DNN is today, we plan to fully carry those forward into DNN Next, right? The idea of having this modular system with extensibility and pages and panes and modules and themes and all of that stuff that we all love and use and leverage in DNN today is still going to be there even as we talk about what this new thing is, right? So let's talk about the web and DNN's relation to the web a little bit, because I think that's important to understand sort of where we're going with DNN in DNN Next. And if you think back to when DNN was created, not all the way back to Stonehenge, but just like 2002, DNN was really about building websites and building these applications, right, that lived on the web. And the thing about those when they first started is that they were all sort of these islands, right? They were these silos, right? You created your content was in this database sort of lived within itself. The users were in this database, your site was in the database, all your content, everything was in that application. And that worked well for a while. And on the web, what you saw was that other sites, Drupal and Umbraco and Sitecore and who knows what else, right? All these other sites were built and all this other stuff, right? And some were big, some were small, but you had all these other sites that were being built up by all these other frameworks. And some of these sites, like Facebook and Twitter and LinkedIn, and they were starting to be used as content marketing channels. Originally, they were social channels. Later, it became content marketing channels, and they also became a source for user identity, right? So if you think about it today, I can use my Facebook, and I can log in almost anywhere on the internet using my Facebook ID. 10 minutes, got it. We're good. So I can use my Facebook ID almost anywhere on the internet, and that's awesome, right? Facebook is now like this source of identity for people on the internet as well as Twitter, right? And so they've created sort of this connected environment for their users. File sharing sites became hubs for marketing assets. As you think about the marketing organizations that use frameworks like DNN and others, where do they store their files? They store their files in places like Dropbox and Box and Azure and Amazon and all these different places out on the internet, right? And they go there, they grab this file, and then they hand it out to different people to use, whether it's inside their marketing organization or what have you. And then you had cloud platforms like Amazon and Azure and others that sprung up. And these cloud platforms fueled things like service-oriented web, where you have people who are building SaaS applications and services that span the web and are connecting the web in various ways and connecting all of these platforms in various ways. And this was really tremendously fueling a lot of other services to evolve. You have things like GitHub and YouTube and SlideShare and all of these other places that people are leveraging both as standalone sites, but also within their applications, within their own website, right? So you can go to a website and it may be exposing content that actually lives out on YouTube and doing that in some very unique ways. The same with GitHub and other places, right? And what you see when you look at all of this in totality is that the web, as it's always been intended, is becoming a very interconnected place, not just with links, but with active functionality, with active content, where content is moving from one site to another site, and the movement is almost transparent to the user, right? I go to one site and it's actually loading content that lives on SlideShare, or it's loading content that lives out on Facebook, or it's loading content that lives up in Dropbox or Box, or it's pushing content somewhere else out to Facebook or Twitter or what have you. And when I logged into that site, I came in as not as a DNN user to the site, but I came in as a Twitter user. I don't even know what DNN is, right? I don't know what that site login is. I know I've got a Facebook login and that's all I need, right? So all of these things are very interconnected, and the services that they all expose are becoming very interconnected. And the challenge that we have is that today DNN is still pretty much this little island off to itself in terms of a platform, in terms of an application, and how the application is fundamentally built. And what we need, and sort of where we're going, and what the big picture is for where we want to go with DNN, is about how do we build a next generation marketing platform, not a CMS, a marketing platform. CMS is just one aspect of what marketers need in terms of a platform and capability. How do we deliver that next generation marketing platform that's built for the way the web operates today, where services and people and content are migrating and transiting from site to site to site, and where it originates is really not as important as your ability to leverage it and use it and consume it and monitor and analyze how people are interacting with content on your site, how users that come to your site consume content. Did that piece of marketing information help them make a buying decision or not, right? Did that piece of marketing information help them in terms of deciding whether to join your organization or not, right? And how do I measure that? How do I know whether that YouTube video is effective or whether I need to create a new one that answers somebody's needs? Can I monitor that? Can I measure that? Can I then take that measurement and use it to help my organization improve our marketing efforts and our development efforts, right? So it's about going beyond just CMS. It's about going and serving a much broader marketing organization and delivering a platform for people who want to build those larger marketing solutions. So it's not about DNN becoming this massive marketing solution. It's about DNN being a platform on which larger marketing solutions will be built, right? One of those solutions being a CMS, one of those solutions being a content marketing system like we're developing in Evoke, one of those systems being maybe even a marketing automation system that someone else may choose to build on the DNN platform. But the key is that DNN becomes a hub and an enabler of all of this technology. And DNN becomes a framework that enables these scenarios, these interconnected services where users and content and files and all of this, where it can monitor those without caring about where those originated or where those live at any given point in time. And then it can expose that information back to the organization to allow them to leverage that information, right? So that's sort of where we see DNN-Next going. And we'll talk about some of the technologies in specific talks. Again, Charles is talking about SPA and HTML, specifically in context of DNN 8. but also that informs the larger conversation about where we're going with DNN-Next, because DNN-Next is fundamentally built on the ASP.NET 5 platform, specifically targeting the core CLR, targeting cross-platform scenarios, right? Because part of DNN-Next is about not just new technology, but also broadening and addressing a broader developer market, targeting and developing a broader marketer and marketing department market, and really expanding the opportunities that are available for people in the ecosystem, expanding the opportunities for people who are today outside the ecosystem that we would like to bring in, right? So having talked about all of that, having talked about DNN-8 and the technology, and having talked about sort of the bigger vision for DNN-Next, what is really the key to all of this? What is the takeaway to all of this? What is the thing that I want to leave you with and really energize you with? And I think that we can't have a discussion like this without talking about the thing that really makes all of this work. And what makes this work is the people, right? It's the community. It's everyone in this room, everyone who's not in this room, who's using DNN, who's been at DNN World, been at all these other events, everyone who has contributed code, everyone who's written a forum post, everyone who's gone out and done something, right, to help build community, that's helped build DNN to what it is today. DNN is not a set of code, right? That's not the entirety of DNN. DNN is the community that exists behind that code. And part of that community and part of what I want people to understand, community is not just a bunch of people sitting in a room, right? It's about people who are actively involved, actively engaged in improving that thing fundamentally that the community is built around. In this case, that thing is DNN software, is that DNN platform, right? So my challenge to you, and the thing that I think is ultimately the key, is how are you going to get involved? How are you going to help improve the platform? Go answer questions in the forums. Show up to an event like this, offer to speak. I know we've got Ignite sessions tomorrow night, right? Sign up for an Ignite session. It's a 5-minute talk about whatever topic you want to talk about. See Gifford if you're interested in participating in that tomorrow night. It's going to Ernst Peter's session and learning how to do a pull request and challenging yourself, as I'm challenging you now, to go out this next week and say, you know what, I'm going to fix one bug. Not 5, not 10. I'm not going to do this massive feature. I want you to go fix one bug. By next Saturday, by the end of next week, submit a pull request for one thing that annoys you about DNN that you want to see fixed. It might be a typo in some resource file. It might be something where color on some field is the wrong color. I don't care what it is, right? Get involved, get engaged, because ultimately the only real success we're going to have as a platform, as a software, as a community, is if people are willing to step up and do the things that myself and Peter and Sean and Charles and many others have done, and that's contribute back to what it is that we all love so much about DNN software and the platform. And so with that, I thank everyone for showing up this morning and appreciate you spending your time with me. And I'll give it back to Peter and DNN. Thank you.